this was tricky, and I'm still not totally convinced that the drawing of it is absolutely right. The tissue paper, keeping the quality of the tissue paper, I found quite tricky. I think that this little bit here through the glass at the back actually is quite convincing, and the bit to the left of it. These are little things, but of course I tend to notice these things on my own work, you know, absolutely acutely. Some of the, you know, the colour mixtures where the single layer of the yellow went over the purple, I think that was correct. But yeah, I mean, I don't particularly like this purple. It's funny, isn't it? When you're painting something, I think it really is important to actually like what you've set up. And it can affect your response to it, funnily enough. I think that's, you know, it's important that what you choose and how you set something up is pleasing. You know, you're not doing it, you're doing it for yourself. And I think it's, you know, it's important to feel that the thing is giving you sort of a resonating something that you feel is lovely, you know, more of a true compliment with the yellow. Maybe that's what it is. But there's something about it that is better for me. It just works better. Again, I've struggled tremendously with this glass lying down, and I've washed it out and redrawn it and changed it several times. But I think the grouping works quite nicely. Like I was saying to you, Yvonne, having this glass here, which is higher than the others, it creates a sort of triangle, doesn't it? A triangle has got more weight at the bottom. How many of you have ever seen the Michelangelo's Pieta, the marble one in the Vatican? I know Sue has. Has anybody else? Yes, and Prue.
Yeah. Yes.
Have you've seen it in pictures, or have you seen it in reality?
Been there.
Well, anyway, all I would say about it is it's a piece that we studied in history of art with the students, and it had there's a lot you can say about it, but the fundamental thing about that piece of sculpture is its composition, and the fact it's a pyramidal composition, and the weight of it is mainly at the bottom of the sculpture. And there's something very pleasing about that shape. And so I think, you know, in a still life, one of the things I would suggest you try and always aim for is a variety of heights. But this business of a pyramid, which is what this is creating, I think is pleasing. Yeah. So, you know, just to re-emphasize that you give yourself plenty of time to think about your composition. The fact that there is some space in and around the shapes is also something, you know, that I try and introduce, you know, that they're not all on top of each other, and yet this one actually is overlapping that glass there from where I'm sitting. It's not exactly the same as what you can see in the camera, because, you know, the iPad is above it and it's a slightly different angle. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this so you can see the whole thing. And I started with the simplest glass in terms of painting it this time. This, I think, is more tricky. These two are more tricky. And I started with a very neutral grey colour, grey wash, which I used to define the shape of it. And just remember that you've got to leave, if you've got highlights on your glass, i.e. things that appear sharp and white, you need to leave them so without paint on them, so you don't have to correct them at the end or try and introduce white at the end. It's better not to. So if you have a problem with that and not knowing how to do it, I would actually draw around the little light shapes. Like there's one down here. I don't know if I can go in a bit closer and show you. That's as close as I can get. But down here, there's a little white shape. And along here, there's some white. Here is white paper, and there. And at the top here, and on the edge, and on the front edge. So I could have drawn around those shapes very lightly with a pencil, and then when I actually apply the wet paint to the paper, I don't let it go into those areas so that they stay white. Now, there is a technique you can use, which is a resist technique, where you can get resist paint, which you can actually paint on, and you can get resist pens, which you can use, which I just think well, I mean, I've never successfully managed to work with them, but some people do. So it's another way of maintaining, whites in your shape. Down here, when I was actually painting the bottom of that glass with that first wash, I was very careful to leave bits of the white paper with no paint on it. So that just to remind you, if you want to work your first wash into a damp surface, you've still got to remember not just to paint white over the whole thing, but bear in mind, are there going to be areas that you need to leave white, in which case don't put any water or anything on them. Is that okay?
Yes, can I
Yes.
Yes, Chris.
the reflection of the tissue paper through the glass,
Yes.
are you just making it a paler colour, or are you
What colour?
Paler.
yeah,
Paler. Okay. Yes.
that's that?
Yeah, I'd start with a pale colour, like here, when I put that wash in and in the glass, I put in a pale mauve.
Yeah.
And then before it was completely dry, dropped in another wash of a slightly stronger mixture of the same colour.
Yeah.
But it's not as strong as what's on the outside here.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't go putting your darts in too quickly. I think I'd start with a pale wash and then put a stronger wash over the top.
Yeah.
Yes, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
the height of the head of Christ and the Virgin, who obviously are the most important part of that particular composition, are at the top of the pyramid, aren't they? That's one thing. And then they've got this beautiful organization of shapes.
In my composition as amended, which I sent you earlier, the tissue has lots of folds on it. How do you make folds in fabric so that you can see like depth and that the fabric has been draped?
Well, you're talking about tissue paper folded. The folds create tones, don't they?
Yes.
So you have where the light is hitting a single layer of tissue paper, it's probably the lightest part. You've got some areas where I don't know if maybe let's have a look at this mine over here. I'll move my painting, just talk about the picture. Here it's very light in the foreground because there's just one layer of tissue paper there. Then you've got a piece of tissue paper coming over, folding over, which is creating a shadow underneath the fold.
Yeah.
Now that is a slightly darker tone of this original yellow colour. So you've got to mix not just one colour, but possibly 3 or 4 to represent the tones within that area of tissue paper.
Yes.
Where it folds over and it goes underneath,
yes.
It's very dark. It's actually creating patterns of tone. And even if you just painted a little area of your tissue paper with that kind of understanding, it would be, it would be convincing. It's not just a case of filling it in as a yellow. So I would look at it And when you start painting, use a very light wash of the colour to start off with, and then consider, you can either put 2 layers of the same colour on top, you can put another layer on top of it when it's half dry. That will
Yes.
create a slightly darker tone. Or you can add something to the colour itself that you've mixed, the yellow, something like a tiny bit of, I mean microscopic bit of red and a microscopic bit of blue, and it will adjust the colour. It will make it slightly grayer, darker. I would try it out on a separate piece of watercolour paper so you can see how it works.
Thank
Before
you.
you actually do it on your own painting.
Okay, thank you.
But this is just something it's to do with, well, it's to do with the understanding of form, really, and draped material and folded tissue paper present similar challenges, if that makes sense. Yes?
Yeah. So when you went between the tall glass and the laying down glass in the little jar, you used something just behind that. So yeah, you went into a very different color. So is that because it's in shadow, or?
Yeah, it's in shadow. And also the yellow's going over the blue tissue paper. So where the yellow's going over the blue tissue paper, it's a slightly more greeny yellow.
Yes. Okay.
So you have to think about what those colours would do if they mix together in the palette.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It makes sense. It's the trouble is reproducing it.
Well, I think Shelley, just have a bit of
a play.
Scrap watercolor paper on one side, and
Yes.
if you need to, just try out things before going on to your painting.
Yes. Yes.
And if you do get it wrong, the next best thing, which I don't know if I mentioned to you last week, but is to have a little sponge like this and some clean water. And if I put some, I'll just show you. If I put paint on like that, right, and I get my sponge with the water, I can literally wash it off before. You have to do this before it's dry. Well, if you can do it before it's dry. If you can't, you can still get off quite a lot even when it is dry. And then blot it with a tissue paper. And if it's a reasonably robust piece of watercolor paper, it should be okay. With the sort of not such heavyweight watercolor paper, you have to be careful because you can damage the surface very easily. It can go a bit bobbly. Now I can still see a bit of pink there, but because that's such a strong pigment that was underneath or that I painted on there, but I've got most of it off.
Yes.
You know.
Thank you. Yeah, very helpful.
Okay.
Uh-huh.